Hey, hey! Thanks for joining me! Drive North with Meg Ellison. Very happy to have joining me from Institute for Reforming Government, Reunited, Attorney Jay Curtis. How are you?
Great. How are you, Meg?
Good, thanks.
I love it. Reunited. Yeah, it's been a while.
Yeah, well, no kidding. And as I said, a long time coming. We used to chat weekly on the Meg Ellison show on the radio, and glad to have you joining me again. And I look forward to well, there's all kinds of stuff we can talk about because, I said to one of my guests, maybe, I don't know, a few weeks ago, it's like watching a daytime soap opera. You can pick up right where you left off. And, nothing, I shouldn't say nothing has happened. A lot has happened, but it's sort of the same story. Unfortunately, there's some, I don't know, I think tough times on the horizon, Jake.
Well, yeah, and frankly, if we went back and um, dug out some of our earlier conversations from last fall into the winter, I'm pretty sure we talked about this Supreme Court race and the implications of the court adding another progressive justice onto the court, and it's IRG has put out a lot of analysis as to kind of what the issues are that could be impacted, whether it's Act 10, um, you know, education freedom. There's a whole host of issues. We actually repackaged all those this spring ahead of the election. We call it the Spring Report. Your listeners can get that at reforminggovernment.org. And we just kind of go through like what does the business climate in Wisconsin look like with a essentially, at least for the foreseeable future, a permanent progressive majority. And I'll just use that as an example. Again, it's 12 or 13 other issues we've analyzed, but when you look at the business climate, the thing is, like, this isn't some IRG theory, right? Prior to the conservative majority, we went through a solid decade or more of the Shirley Abramson era, who was advancing all sorts of novel theories like risk contribution theory, where manufacturers, whether they actually produced a product, really didn't matter, right? If they were operating within that area, they could be found negligent, or there could be liability assigned, and it really impacted the state's business climate. And so again, this isn't some IRG theory. We saw it, we lived it during the Abramson era, and then we had a solid 15-year run where conservatives in large part controlled the Supreme Court and issued some really good decisions and looked at things from an originalist standpoint. But as you just alluded to, we are going the opposite direction right now.
Well, and it's depressing, honestly. And I don't know, I don't know how to advise, frankly. I mean, I think I follow a lot of the, I don't know, what do you call them, pundits, or just people that everyone has an opinion on social media, and so everyone's got an idea about who's to blame and what's to blame. And I think we need to identify what we must change in order to turn this around, because it's November is coming, and I'm already seeing the left doing a victory dance. You look at the predictions for even the United States House of Representatives and the United States Senate, and it looks like they're both now in play, which would leave President Donald Trump a lame duck president in his final 2 years. And but coming back to Wisconsin, I mean, there's some critical elections coming up, and which first and foremost is the governor's race, and then even holding the legislature, which I don't. I guess I can't say I have. I know I've heard too that I don't have confidence that our state senate will be held by Republicans in this upcoming election.
Yeah. So as you and I were talking about earlier off air, maybe we start with what we just experienced, which was not pleasant. I think Congressman Tiffany probably put it the best way when he said we just basically got our butts kicked. There's no we can probably quickly address that and then move on to the bigger implications and the things you're talking about. And yeah, everybody loves to give their I think as the kids say, right, their hot take. There's not much of a hot take here, right? This was a complete wipeout. If you break down the state for Lazar versus Taylor by the congressional districts, right? Lazar only won one of the congressional districts, the fifth, which is Congressman Fitzgerald's very conservative area, and she only won that by a few points. I thought I had the point. I think it was like 7 points. So that should be in the right the 20 range. So it was a wipeout. I know you and I think offline talked about some of the counties in your neck of the woods, counties that are reliably red, that went progressive. And I have a map here in front of me. If you look at even Taylor, even counties like I think it's Calumet. I mean, really, really conservative. Calumet went to Lazar, but you look at Portage, 65-35. Taylor won that. Wood County was 52-48 for Taylor, and then obviously the big one, Marathon, was 51-49 for Taylor. I mean, Vilas County, 50. It was close, 50.2 to 49.7. Again, we could go through all the counties. The
Right.
reality is, right, this was not a good showing for Lazar. Ultimately, a 60-40 loss. What was interesting, I kind of went through the last. I did a look back the last 10 years. So starting in 16, Rebecca Bradley beat Joanne Kloppenberg 52-47. 17, Ziegler actually won. It was an uncontested race. And then it was really 2018, right? Obviously, later that year, that's the election that Governor Walker lost his reelect. And interestingly, it kind of and hopefully this isn't foreshadowing for this fall, but if you look at that election in the spring of 18, kind of forgotten about this one, 55-44. That was the Dalit win over Skrenak, Judge Skrenak, and that was a very effective campaign for Justice Dalit. She I think a lot of commentators noted like she really neutralized the kind of the law and order issue, right? She essentially became the law and order candidate, which had been the lane for conservatives really over the previous 15 years. And 19 was a little unique. That was Justice Hagedorn over Neubauer, who recently retired from District 2. It was close, 50-49. And as you recall, that's one where Hagedorn, right, there was almost kind of a faith component that the left had kind of come after him on some issues that he personally had voiced an opinion on more from a faith standpoint. And so he eked out a win, but 50-49, right? This was not a commanding win. And then 20 is really kind of where the bottom starts to fall off. Kurowski over Kelly, 55-44, and 23 Protasewicz over Kelly, 55-44, same margin. And then last year Crawford over Schimmel, 55-44, and then obviously 60-40 Taylor over Lazar. So starting with 18, we start to see this shift. And then I think, and this is probably the bigger issue you want to talk about, Meg, is well, why? What is it? And I think part of it is, money, message, and infrastructure. And unfortunately, that we had started to lose those, again, going all the way back to 18. But I think everything's been kind of blown wide open with this election, just revealing how we don't have the infrastructure to raise money. I have an opinion on the state party on that if you want to talk about it. Messaging, I think that's something critical that we need to talk about. And then infrastructure. I would say that's kind of tied into money. I'm not a money guy. I don't do fundraising. But at the end of the day, I don't care what organization you're running. If you don't have the financing, you're not going to be able to operate. You're not going to have the infrastructure. And you're not going to be able to support candidates. That's just a reality. I don't care if you're in the nonprofit world, if you're in the political world, if you're in the business world, right? You need to have the financing. And right now, we don't have it. I guess my final point, and then I want to hear your thoughts, Meg, is I looked state party fundraising going back to 2017, um, the difference is roughly $61 million. The Democrats have outraised the Republican Party. So this is a real problem. It's not personal against um, Shimming or anybody. This is just a reality, right? So, and that's just hard dollars. That is not accounting for outside groups. This last cycle, it was 9-1 in favor of Taylor from hard dollars. Again, those are dollars contributed to the campaign. If you include outside spending, it was 15-1. You're not going to win a school board race, let alone a statewide race, if you're getting outraised and outspent 15-1.
So I don't know. There's a lot of blame to go around, perhaps. I mean, we talked about this before we started recording, but just and I think that there has been, and honestly, I suppose it's been an issue or a narrative that I have heard since I've been plugged into Wisconsin politics is this there is an anti-RPW sentiment and don't give your money to the party, and it even has trickled to the county parties. And and I'm just going to float this thought out there. I think it may be one component of many that and I have always been I've always worked in the private sector, and as an employee of a private business, I am a representative of that business, and so my how I conduct myself, especially as it pertains to my role within an organization, reflects back on that organization. And I guess I look at some of the antics, perhaps, of some of those that are at the county party level. First of all, bad mouthing RPW, which certainly doesn't do the Republican brand any good. And secondly, telling and then going out of their way to tell people not to give money to RPW or to give to the party. Well, that certainly doesn't help the cause in any way, and that's something that I've heard for years, and it's unfortunate because I think we can talk about the leader, and you mentioned Brian Shimming. We can talk about the leader of the state chairman of the RPW, and I guess the buck stops with him, of course. But if there's never been buy-in from the franchisees or the county party executive boards, or whatever the chairs, there's we're not going to have success. We have to have a cohesive organization from top to bottom. And and I guess I don't know, and I know that there are those that are calling for Brian Shimming to step down as the chair or to be replaced. And I, frankly, if and I'm not volunteering myself ever, but I just wonder how difficult it is going to be to recruit someone because you instantly have a target on your back, and I don't know how that's overcome. And part of it, I think, is because the nature of Republicans is that we are very fiercely independent. We don't want to be micromanaged. We don't want to, we're just not good at playing well with one another, interacting well with one another. So, I mean, there's a lot that I just said, but I think we can parlay on that.
Yeah, I think much of what you said is very relevant, and I think you're right on a number of issues. I mean, look, I served. It was years ago, but I served. I think I was vice chair. I don't even really remember. I think it was vice chair of my local county party here in Ozaki County for I think one term. Um, I, I, I I got out because, frankly, I looked at it and nothing against kind of the local party here. In fact, I think right now, thankfully, it's run very well. I think the chairman does a really good job. But to your point, Meg, I mean, I have a career, kids, wife. Like, the infighting was just unacceptable to me.
And how
Um,
long ago was that, Jake?
it had to it probably 10 years ago.
See,
Yeah,
and that's what's so unfortunate is that it's just a
right.
revolving cycle.
And so, but I think there's a point there. I think the point is, I think a lot of people view the local county parties as almost like a club. It's just kind of something to do. And I'm not suggesting they're not passionate. They don't care about electing good conservatives. But at the end of the day, like there's a lot of time spent on things that just are not relevant. So I think what's the answer? I think the answer is um, I do think it starts at the top. But I think if we start at the top, it'll trickle down to the local parties. Is we just have to professionalize things. Um, and right away there's hesitancy because, as you said, like we don't want top down. We like our kind of autonomous county parties, which is fine. Um, but I think if you do it right, if you start it at the top, I think it could positively impact local county parties. And so, starting at the top, right, this is not about um, really attending Lincoln Days or doing communications, all of things I think Shimming focuses on. At the end of the day, you have got to raise money. The Democrats have really perfected this. I mean, they're raising right. Was it last year, or the cycle before where they're doing like the Hollywood fundraisers where they're doing Zoom calls like this and raising millions of dollars because they have a bunch of actors that come in and raise money. Right, that's a huge operation, and that's why they've been successful. In addition to some other reasons, and I think we'll get to that. But it's got to start with like we have to professionalize how we do things at the state party. Um, we have to have a model that has fundraising goals. And again, this isn't personal, but at the end of the day, there's also nothing. I'm not revealing any really secrets here. I mean, these are all publicly available reports. I think it was after the 22 election, so this would have been the first quarter of 23. Um, the state party raised something like $50,000, and then if you dig deeper, it was basically a transfer from Roger Roth. I mean, the state party literally did not raise like almost a dime for a quarter. Like that's just not acceptable. And my problem is this has been happening for years. Um,
Which
and so
predates shimming, right?
it predates Shimming. I think it's
Mhm.
frankly gotten worse under Shimming. And there has to be complete recalibration. And to your point, though, Meg, it's got to be done quickly because we have a fall election. Um, Completely restructuring and refocusing on what the party is for. The party is there to kind of create an infrastructure and to raise money. That's what it's
Mhm.
for. The individual campaigns, they're going to have their messaging. Um, Events. I mean, frankly, this is Meg. To your point, this is maybe where the county parties come in. Other than a convention, annual convention, really the party should be focused on fundraising. I know that's not exciting, but that's what the Democrats have done, and this is why they've just really dominated Wisconsin politics outside of Trump's win in 24 and Senator Johnson's win in what 22. Like we have nothing to show for any of the efforts done by the state party. But to your point, yes, if you have a successful state party, that's where then I think county parties can be more effective, right? Because they will get the assistance from the top, maybe some guidance, because we're always going to have, as conservatives, as Republicans, I think we're always going to have a very kind of independent model. That's to your point, Meg. I've been around right conservative politics for 20 plus years now. I get it, right? We are independent minded people. It's not going to be the Democrats are very good at this. I always point to the primary in 22, right? Within 24 hours, you had three major Senate candidates drop out, and Barnes, was the anointed candidate. We don't do it that way.
Do you agree
Uh,
with that or disagree with that? I mean, do you think we should do that more?
Um, not to throw a lawyerly response. I think it's kind of case by case. I think okay. Let's make it very very relevant. This cycle, I know, Tommy Thompson and others have started to sniff around the gubernatorial race. I don't know. Maybe this is not a popular opinion. Look, at the end of the day, we have a good candidate in Tom Tiffany. He's running hard. He has infrastructure. He has northern Wisconsin locked down. And I know he's going to be spending more time in southeast Wisconsin. I just saw an event for him, and I think it's in 2 weeks in Waukesha County. Um, in my mind, this is not the cycle to have a primary, right? You can look at past elections, 2010. I think there's a strong argument. Mark Newman, great guy, very nice guy. I actually think he made Walker a much better candidate, right? He ran a tough primary, and I think made Walker better, strengthened his position in southeast Wisconsin, and so I think there are cycles where a primary can actually help. I think this cycle, right, all the cards are stacked against the center right candidates going into this fall. Again, I mean, if you want to dispute that, fine, but you're living under a rock, right? It is going to be a tough fall for Republicans and conservatives, and so this is a cycle where if we have a good candidate, get behind him or her, and be united. I think starting at the top with Tiffany. I mean, full disclosure, I've been a fan of his for a while. I've always told the story. Anytime we go to D.C., he meets with us in person. I think the last time we went out there, his staff had to break up our meeting because we had been going on for an hour. I think he cares, like genuinely cares about conservative policies in
Mhm.
this state. He's kind of a policy wonk. At the same time, he's kind of a regular guy, right? Wife, kids. He's run small businesses. That's what we need. That's
Grew
what
up on a
Wisconsin
farm.
likes. Yep, yep. I mean, look at. I was just talking about this with somebody the other day. Um, Governor Evers is not an exciting candidate, but Wisconsinites have elected him twice. I think had he chosen to run, again, you can dispute this, but look at the polling. He still polls pretty strong. He probably would have at least put up a real fight this fall. Um, Tom, kind of fits that mold, and maybe not the most exciting candidate in the world, but he's done real stuff and he's accomplished, and he's kind of a regular guy. That's what Wisconsinites want, and that's why I think going into this fall, despite I think it being a really tough environment for conservatives, I think Congressman Tiffany has a chance because the Democratic field right now is so fractured, um, with multiple candidates, some on the far, far left of the party. Uh, I mean, I think there is a chance that you could see out of a fractured Democratic field, a very, very progressive candidate win that primary, whether it's Hong or Barnes or somebody from kind of that wing of their party. The kind of the more moderate, maybe business community oriented Democratic candidates are getting no traction right now in that field. So he's got a shot because I think if it's an extreme candidate out of the Democratic primary, I think a lot of Wisconsinites are going to look at Congressman Tiffany and his kind of background is going to resonate with them.
Do you think I got to go back to Evers not running? Do you think he was forced out? Was that a case of where the Democrats got together and said, you know what, you're done?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I don't know. I mean, that does not appear to be the case. If you look at if you look at the MU polls, he still polls pretty strong, right? There's a lot of independents that still. I mean, he's kind of right. There's not a lot of from a policy standpoint. I have significant disagreements with him. I mean, you look at. We've been kind of compiling a list of his vetoes. I mean, he's vetoing a lot of common sense bills that have come out of this legislature. Um, the school choice one, I think, is in my view is the biggest one. Right, that's the tax credit that individuals would get if they contributed to um, any school, public schools or choice schools. Right, they would have gotten a tax credit. Would have really transformed the education landscape in Wisconsin. And again, this is a national, it's a federal tax credit, meaning, okay, since it's not going to be open, but a governor had to opt in. So since Evers isn't opting in, if you're a Wisconsinite and you want that credit, you're going to have to basically make a contribution to a school in Iowa, right? It just makes no sense. And so there's numerous examples of that from a policy standpoint. But from an electoral standpoint, right, he's just kind of he talks about his education background and kind of that aw shucks mentality. I think he would have been tough. So I think it's a long answer, but if I had to choose, I had to make a kind of call. I'm not sure he got forced out. I wonder if he just genuinely didn't want to run for a third term. And these are long, right? 4 years. Think about private sector, right? I mean, 4 years in today's economy, that's a relatively long time to be in one job. I know a lot of people hop around a lot. So I think he just didn't want to do it. But that's just my right. That's my opinion. I have no idea what goes on behind the scenes on the left.
Oh, good. Nor do I don't know if they even do. So what about you talk about fundraising, state party fundraising? Do you also think that county parties need to have measurables when it comes to fundraising? I mean, if these are races that are in order for the county parties to do outreach because they are the ones that reside, live, work, and interact with those in their communities. I mean, isn't it necessary that they also be at least held to some sort of fundraising, I don't know, goals so that it doesn't just fall on the state party?
So look, I'm not a campaign finance expert or anything like that, but my kind of basic understanding is, I guess, as follows: could county parties do a better job fundraising, kind of independent of the state party? I mean, sure, yes. There are examples. I'm not as familiar with the county parties up in your neck of the woods, Meg, but I know around here, right, the Ozaki County Party, I think the Waukesha County Party, they have kind of their own fundraising apparatuses. They're not raising millions of dollars though, right? These are the local party, the local county party, getting some donations from concerned business men or women in their county who care about Republican politics. I think Waukesha County has enough fundraising where I think they have like a permanent field office, and I think they have a staffer. And I know they have their WISRED kind of effort where they put out guides for local elections. I haven't seen their numbers, but that's probably the best example. And again, they're not raising millions of dollars. I think the reality is, with the way kind of we're structured, like you have national money that's going to come in and support state parties, and then it kind of trickles down. So this is where I get back to my previous point. Like we have to just kind of professionalize the operation, right? There's going to be national groups that come and provide funding to the state party, and then the state party should have some metrics. Now, Meg, to your point, I think one maybe compromise here would be, um, maybe more funding goes to the county parties that are just better organized, where there's not infighting, where the infrastructure is in place such that, right, those dollars are actually going to, right? I mean, again, you can apply business principles. Where's the return on investment? Where's the ROI going to come in, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you have no infrastructure at the county party level, every 2 years the board changes over because you're fighting all the time. I mean, maybe that's a metric that the state party would use to say, okay, well then we're not, we're not funding your county party. If there's an important race, right, those dollars they're going to go directly to the campaigns, right? And so I mean, in other words, have some standards. Whereas if it's a successful county party that has infrastructure that can then use those dollars to help local campaigns, whether it's for the state senate, assembly, circuit court races, then maybe those dollars go directly to the county party. So I think you could certainly have some metrics in place, but again, at the end of the day, a local county party probably is in reality not going to go out and fundraise millions of dollars. The state party should, right? I mean, that's what they exist to do, or what it exists to do, and right now that's just not happening. So I think a change needs to happen. I mean, we like, okay, stepping back from all the nuances that you and I are talking about. Like if you were looking at this scenario, right? We just painted the picture. Starting in 2018, we have the one outlier with Justice Hagedorn. We're going on a decade of losses, whether it's for the Supreme Court or you know partisan statewide offices. Something has to change, right? This is not personal, but this would be like, use whatever analogy you want. This is like the sports team, right? The team that's going on 10 straight losing seasons. I mean, at some point you got to make a change, or to use a business example, right? You have 10 straight years of lost revenue or decreased sales, right? You have to change. And I just personally, I think that's where we're at. We need to change how we do things here in the state of Wisconsin so that the state party is viewed as more of an asset. Because as we, maybe to segue into this fall, like right now, if you're a statewide candidate, like, can you really rely or be assured that there's going to be that infrastructure in place? I mean, if I were running a statewide campaign, I would kind of be planning on having to do it myself.
Hmm. Right. Well, and going back to what measurables or metrics are required of the county parties, uh, the Democrats are really good at aligning themselves with like-minded organizations within their communities. And, you can very quickly discern when you hear, excuse me, when you hear of some sort of event going on, and I'll just take as an example in Wausau, and very quickly you can decide, oh, who's behind that. And I mean, sometimes it's there's no political affiliation behind it, but it seems to me that the Republicans and the county parties are solely focused on the county party, or at least those that are members of the county party, and they don't expand their horizons. And I mean, even being kind of living what our platform is and getting involved in, I don't know, some sort of fundraiser for, or some sort of efforts for a homeless shelter, or just types of efforts that we should be getting involved in. And it seems as if that would create more awareness about the Republican Party, because I'll be honest with you, I'm not a member of the local county party any longer. I don't really have any plans of doing so. It's the same people. And there are some that suggest, I had a conversation over the weekend that suggest that the county parties are dying. And I wouldn't say that about all of them, but it's the same coffee klatch or the same social club that meets once a month, and there's not really an awful lot accomplished or changed, or any kind of measures that will push the Republican Party brand forward, and to at least define who Republicans are in your community. I think is critical, and I don't think I've seen it done. I don't know. I can't speak for your part of the state, but I haven't seen it done up here. And just to, I don't know, come up with some strategies or some ideas about how to maybe not necessarily increase the membership of the county party, but at least make people aware. Oh, this is who Republicans are. This is what we are about, and we're about the defining the platform better, so that when it comes to election day, we're not scrambling to find the votes to push a Supreme Court candidate across the finish line.
Well, that's absolutely right. And actually, so I think we've completely addressed the money issue, and I think you're pivoting to, I guess, if I'm following my notes here, kind of messaging. And I think you're making actually a really critical point. It's actually one that I was just thinking about this morning. When you think about like messaging, I always, you know, there are those of us that you and I, right, that this is what we do, this is what we've done, right? We follow policy, we follow news. I always think in terms of, if you're a campaign, that's not your audience, right? The audience is, I think this will make sense to a lot of people that follow politics closely. Kind of normal people, right? Normal in the sense that like the average normal person is raising a family, working a job. They may have a hobby, and they maybe are following news. I mean, because we have to admit, like, the amount of news that people like you and I consume is not normal. But it's because it's part of our job, right? Um, and I think the mistake the party and campaigns make is, and I guess I'll put it this way: I know people personally that are conservative, that are very informed, did not vote in this election. And I think the critical test is, to a lot of grassroots people, there's like animosity towards voters like that. To me, I look at that and say that's a failure in the center right movement, right?
Agreed.
Because those people, look, we can't, we're really passionate, we care about policy, and that's fine. Not everybody's going to have that same level of passion or interest. If you're part of a conservative movement, if you are um, if you are part of the state party infrastructure or a campaign, it's your job to give people a reason to vote. And it was startling, the people that I talked to over the last week, that are frankly very, relative to the average voter, are actually probably more informed, and they still either didn't know the election was happening, or even maybe more problematically, they knew the election was happening, but really just had, there was no energy, no incentive in their mind to show up and vote. And again, you can criticize those people, but maybe to use a kind of a church analogy, that's like, if you have a neighbor that's not going to church, like walking up to them and scolding them for not showing up to church is probably not the best way to evangelize, right? You want to
Right.
encourage them and give them a reason to show up. I mean, it's the same thing in politics. If you just scold, I mean, I was talking to a friend, and we were talking about the election. Um, he knew it happened, and I said, "Well, did you vote?" And he was like, "No, I saw no reason to vote." So I could have scolded him. Instead, I view that as like that's a failure in the conservative movement, and it comes down to messaging. So I think that's a long-winded way of getting to your point, Meg, and that is, yeah, I mean, the center right movement has to become more relevant. If you're a local county party, um, and if you're not having a roundtable about the county's business climate, like, I think that's a miss, right? That's a prime opportunity to, maybe not directly within the political world, but use the platform to bring in people that care about like the local business climate, and then along the way point out like, hey, we have a governor right now that, depending on how you view his track record, but I would view it as one that's not really focused on lowering the regulatory burden on businesses, addressing property tax increases, which are happening, right? He's just going to have excuse after excuse. I mean, prime audience. Meg, I think you're making a really critical point. Like, every county party should be doing that. And so, right, that doesn't require a lot of funding, right? That requires finding a place to get together and talk about your county's business climate, and pointing out that center right candidates in the state probably are the ones that have a better solution to those challenges. And to be honest with you, again, now I don't follow every county party in the state, but I guess I don't see very many events like that. I think of one in Waukesha County. There's like a business roundtable group. Um, but Meg, I think you're absolutely right. Those are missed opportunities to be relevant. Again, kind of within that context of just a normal person. Like, somebody with a job and a family is probably not going to take a Tuesday night to sit at a local executive board meeting of your county party for 3 hours. Like, we just have to be realistic. That's not going to happen. Will they show up on a Saturday morning to have a coffee and talk about the county's business climate? Maybe. I mean, it's certainly probably more likely than having them sit at a executive board meeting on a Tuesday night. And so I think what you're getting at is just being relevant, and being relevant to kind of the person who's not maybe as politically inclined as your average county party person is, and not viewing that as a negative, just reality, right? There are going to be people that are going about their lives that maybe they do care about policy, but just not to the same level as we do, and we have to find ways to reach out to them, not to scold them.
Or get creative. I mean, maybe there are other events that can be planned that would not necessarily attract the political junkies. I mean, it's a foregone conclusion that those that are, eat, breathe, sleep politics, they're going to show up and vote. But and I'm not going to say who it is, but I will, and I get contacted. I'm sure you do as well, Jake, the night before the election. And I got a message from someone that should most definitely, I'm not going to say who it is, but should most definitely have known which Supreme Court candidate to be voting for. And I had to tell the person who to vote for. And, that he was very grateful, but I was shocked that, in light of his, in light of his business, he should have known, but he should have known. And I mean, that was just one indicator. But then the other thing, I just wanted to point out here in Marathon County, 2 weeks before the election, I was running some errands in Rib Mountain, which is just, neighbor to Wausau. And, the very congested or increasingly congested Rib Mountain Drive where all the businesses are, where it's the shopping district. The streets of Rib Mountain on a Saturday morning were lined with protesters on the left it was the No Kings thing. And I called a friend of mine and I said, we are in trouble. I had never in all the time, even during the Tea Party days, I mean, I guess I was part of that, but I had never seen that type of crowd of people, or that volume of people protesting on our opposite side. And it really, I mean, I said, this is not a good sign. And then I look at comparing Schimmel's numbers to Lazar's numbers in this last election, and Schimmel got 29,369 votes in 2024. Is that right? Yeah, yeah. And
Schimmel was last year 25.
25, excuse me. Yes,
Yeah,
25. Yeah, it sort of perplexed me. Yes, 20.
he,
And
he was
Lazar
a
in
long time
Marathon
ago.
County got 15,970. So almost half of the votes that Schimmel got. And I mean, what happened? And I mean, I guess we have to, and I have this whole spreadsheet of every county in the state, and I mean, it's example after example. And Marathon is a red county, and we haven't elected a leftist Democrat statewide candidate since Dave Obey in 2008. And so now here we are in 2026, and Marathon County, I don't know, are we on the precipice of something unfortunate?
Well, yeah, so we're actually doing a nice job of working through our outline here. We've talked about money, which I think we also established leads into the infrastructure. We've talked about message. I think what you're hitting on is the third point, just intensity, and passion. Right now, same thing is happening here in Ozaki County. I actually, I was really upset on election night. I knew it was not going to be a good night. I actually uh, I actually said it was going to be 20-point loss. I felt that, and I compared Schimmel to Lazar, all the things he had she didn't have, and he still loses by 10. So I actually was not surprised at all at the 20-point loss. Um, I looked at Ozaki County. 2019 was the Prosser race. He won Ozaki County with 71% of the vote. Taylor won Ozaki County last week or the week before with 52% of the vote. So that's a 23-point swing in 7 years. That's significant. Now the problem is the problem between like Ozaki and Marathon is I think Ozaki is still competitive, but again, um, we were at 71% 7 years ago. I think we are now getting close to permanently being a 50-50 county. I think Marathon and some of these other counties, I think there what you're seeing is just an intensity gap or a likelihood of voting gap if we're going to apply that to the fall election. And that's that's where the problems come in. Are you a Democrat county? No, you're Marathon's not. It's maybe becoming a little more competitive, The problem, the more immediate problem, is just voter intensity. I think there's a lot of center right voters that are not satisfied what is happening at the national level. I mean, we have to come to grips with that. Um, and then going back to the earlier points, they don't see the fundraising, they don't see the messaging, and so they don't see a reason to come out and vote for a Wisconsin candidate like Maria Lazar. Um, and going to that intensity issue at the national level, and I'm just going to put in a plug for Wisconsin Speaks. This is a report that IRG recently put out, because I think there are a lot of people grappling with, right? You can go county by county. I mean, frankly, after a while, like, we get it. It was a blowout. Like, the bigger question I think that you're asking, Meg, is why? Why is this happening? I mean, one of the reasons, not exclusively, but one of the reasons is we have changed the makeup of the conservative movement. There are some positive things. I think right, the kind of more blue collar, hardworking individual that's now more aligned with the conservative movement, the Republican Party. I think is a good thing. I think, a lot of us, right? The joke was, my first job, I worked for a very brief period for the Republican Party. I don't know if I had ever stepped foot in a country club until I worked for those 8 months for the Republican Party. And I remember thinking, like, wow, this is, I kind of grew up middle class, Milwaukee, and then moved out to the suburbs. My parents did okay, but right, didn't hang out at country clubs, and that was really the Republican Party for years. And I think there was a misalignment. Now there's a lot of hardworking, trades, blue collar folks that now are more aligned with the Republican Party. So I think that's a good thing. The issue is, and again, we just have to be realistic about this. We have traded a lot of those, we've absorbed a lot of those voters in exchange for maybe suburban voters. I'm kind of at ground zero, right? So I'm in Grafton. I'm sitting right now in Grafton, Ozaukee County. If I went around my neighborhood, I could point to multiple people that work, middle management for Kohler, JCI, bigger corporations. They've maybe moved from Milwaukee or the North Shore because they want lower taxes, they want good schools, they want safe communities, all of which are provided here in Ozaukee County, but they still vote for Democrats because I think a lot of them care about maybe some I would view like non-core issues, right? Schools, safety, taxes are core issues. Environmental quality. It's important, and for some people that is the motivating factor, right? Abortion is still, I think, a critical issue in this state. Gun control, like those issues, are what's, I think, motivating a lot of those voters in these suburban communities, like Grafton and Mequon, Elm Grove, Racine, Kenosha, kind of that ring around Milwaukee. Those areas are changing. And the problem is, and this is ultimately why we put out this report, is those outstate voters that, again, I'm glad are now part of the movement. The problem is, if Trump's not on the ballot, they're not voting. And so Courtney Gustafson from IRG did a great job actually talking to these voters. These were voters that voted in 20, didn't vote in 22 for governor. And we asked them why. It's not because they're not passionate or frankly didn't care or weren't informed. I mean, there's kind of like some fundamental misalignment. I think part of it was they view the federal government as being able to address a lot of these core issues, when in fact, Meg, you and I know it's state government that has a far more direct impact on families, businesses, right, schools. Yes, there are some big issues that happen at the federal level, but day to day, it's state government. And that message just did not get through to a lot of those voters. So, I mean, there are answers out there. Like, we kind of know what the issues are. We need to figure out how to quickly, right, by fall, make the adjustments so that, again, the people that we talk to at IRG in our Wisconsin Speaks report actually understand, yes, this governor's race really matters, right? Whether you own a business or are raising a family or retiring, right? It's Wisconsin government that's going to have the most direct impact, and therefore you need to be motivated to go out to vote, because I think you're absolutely right, Meg. If you're not prepared for this fall, there's going to be I think, in the business they would call it an enthusiasm gap. We have to close that gap right now, because right now, same thing happening here in Ozaukee and Waukesha, huge no Kings rallies. I mean, there is energy probably equivalent to what we saw in 2010. And as we know, those midterms did not bode well for Democrats, right? There was a huge moment in the conservative movement where we kind of regained control. And unfortunately, right now, the shoe looks like it's on the other foot. We still have time, but we have to recognize where things are headed.
Well, and I'll just add to the bad news about the North, because in addition to Marathon County going for Taylor, so did Oneida County, as did Vilas County. And that is shocking, frankly. And it's not because there are more Democrats than Republicans in those counties. Again, it's a turnout issue. And we have to figure out, I think we'll go back to, and then we'll wrap things up, but messaging and it all wraps. I think you nailed it with all three: money, messaging, and infrastructure. And I would like to hope that there is someone that cares in this state. I know Institute for Reforming Government does, of course, but there's someone that has the ability to assess all of this and to come up with a plan about how. I mean, it's one thing to prognosticate like you and I are, and like many others are on social media, etc. But it's another thing to care enough to actually, and I'm not saying you and I don't care, but as you stated, we have jobs, we have families, we have lives outside of eating, breathing, sleeping politics. But it's got to be there. I feel like there has to be someone that can reach those. I guess we'll call them low propensity voters or Trump voters. I guess that, and is it Trump himself that has to be the one to reason with these people and say, look, you got to get out and vote. I don't remember seeing anything about Trump engaging in this election here in Wisconsin prior.
Yeah, you're raising good points. The one thing I would do is I would maybe separate, bifurcate, right? Supreme Court races, spring races from fall races. They're different, and therefore I think maybe the messaging needs to be a little different. I'm continuing to struggle with the spring Supreme Court race, the messaging. Clearly, and again, I nothing against Lazar. She's a good person, good Court of Appeals judge, great background. She didn't have obviously the infrastructure, didn't have the money. I would say her messaging was off, right? I think I think you can say you are a conservative, kind of originalist candidate, right? That believes in kind of conservative outlook on the law. I think that's fair. She even kind of, I guess honestly, as I sit here, I'm not even, I don't really know where she landed on that. I know originally she said she bristled, I think, when Jay Weber called her the conservative, um, which was a huge mistake in my opinion. Because, as you said, and I knew similar people that were very engaged that didn't know she was a conservative. Well, I mean, part of it was self-inflicted, right? She kind of pushed back on that. Well, I'm the independent. And we live in an environment. I'm sorry, that does not sell with anybody. People want to know kind of where you're aligned. She has a fair point, right? The last MU poll has 85% of Wisconsinites wanting judicial candidates to run on their values, right? That was the word Justice Protasiewicz used when she ran in 23 and beat Justice Kelly. That's problematic under the Code of Judicial Conduct. They aren't supposed to be forecasting how they're going to vote on cases, and to say, to very clearly state what your values are is problematic. The problem is, and so, right, I'm sure I'll get pushback by that statement. I'm agreeing, though, that from an electoral standpoint, we have a problem because that's what, again, MU, which actually I think many times puts out good polls, right? 85-15. So that's a big percentage of conservatives that want that as well. I guess I'm in the 15%. I don't think it's appropriate, but that's what Wisconsinites want. and the Democrats have, or excuse, well, I guess the progressives, right, when it comes to
Mm-hmm.
these judicial races, they have completely embraced that, and we
Mm-hmm.
haven't. And I'm admitting it's a problem. I guess I don't know exactly what the solution is. Again, I think you can say you're conservative when it comes to judicial philosophy, because what does that mean? That means, right, respect for separation of powers. That means respect for originalism and textualism. And I know those are buzzwords that people don't want us to be using in elections. I think you can say you're conservative judicially. I think that's fair, and that's where maybe Maria Lazar kind of dropped the ball because she pushed back on that. I think the messaging. That's probably not a great answer because I don't know what the solution is right now. I think for fall elections, I think that's much more clear. And frankly, we don't do politics at IRG, but we put out, I think, good work product. We've been focusing and doing polling on kitchen table issues, i.e., these are the issues that Wisconsinites care about. They care about affordability, and we actually talk about this again in our Wisconsin Speaks report. What do these people that voted in 20 but didn't vote in 22 care about? It all comes down to affordability. Right now, there's subparts there: housing, right, inflation, that does our cost of living, increases, right, our wages keeping up with those increases, um, energy costs, right. That's all I think feeding into the overall issue of affordability. That's what voters care about. So if I were running a campaign, I would be focusing on the issues that are motivating everyday voters. I think this is the problem right now at the federal level. Is we're we being the center right movement, right? We're not really aligned right now with the average voter on what they care about. Um, Even at the national level, right? It's basically all the things I articulated for the state, it applies to the national level too. People care about affordability. They want their kids to be going to good schools. If you have a kid that's graduated from college, what does a job market look like? What does a job market look like for you? Are you entering retirement? Right, all these issues. That's what people care about. At the federal level, they do care about immigration, and the border's largely been secured, and so now we have to. I think personally, right, we need to take a nuanced approach with kind of what that second level is because I think there's a lot of people peeling off with the current approach. So that's all to say. I think this fall election, um, I don't have an answer for spring yet. I think for fall, I think it's there, right? It's affordability. I think Congressman Tiffany, looking at his messaging, I think he understands that that's the issues that people care about, and so there's an answer, but we just need to get people motivated.
Well, and just to conclude what we were talking about with change that needs to happen in Wisconsin, I think whether you are at the county party level or the state party level or somewhere in between, turnout of Republicans is what we need to focus on, and how we figure it out. I mean, we know that there are voters out there that will vote for Republicans. I mean, Donald Trump is proof of that from the 2024 election. And so, how do we figure out in Wisconsin how to get all of those Trump voters to the polls when we need them?
Well, and obviously it's self-serving for IRG to be plugging this report, but really, I mean, you're making an excellent point. It was a year and a half ago that Wisconsin voted Republican, right? So when you look at now, 18 months later, we now have a 20-point loss. Like, it's bad. It's really bad, but we're not a permanent 20-point state. In
Right.
other words, right, if we don't change things, we could end up there, but we're not there yet. Because to your point, Meg, a year and a half ago, we had one of the biggest wins nationally, for President Trump. So what's the answer? Speaking to these people. Why did you not show up to vote in 22? Right, they showed up again in 24. So right, we got a cycle. They voted in 20. They didn't vote in 22. They voted in 24. They didn't vote this spring. How do we get them to vote this fall? And I think it's making kind of the 2 point message. A, state government matters, and B, all these affordability issues that you care about. There's a solution here. if you are willing to compare the two candidates at the state level.
Jay Curtis from Institute for Reforming Government, reforminggovernment.org. This is just the first of many conversations we're going to be having, so stay tuned right here. Thank you for joining me, Jake. I appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Meg.